The first question we have for today is about karma. Prarabdha is given to souls at the time of their birth by God's ordinance. Can God or Jnani change the prarabdha of any soul after it is allocated during birth, during the life of that soul? That's the first question.
Yes, of course. God, who has allotted the prarabdha, can also modify it if appropriate. But normally, when God allots the prarabdha, he allots it in the way that will be most beneficial for us. And he does so knowing what is most beneficial for us. So it is highly unlikely that he would have any reason to change what he has already allotted. But of course, for God, everything is possible. However, even if he did change the prarabdha, we wouldn't know it, because we know the prarabdha only when we experience it, and we cannot know what is changed. Moreover, if we trust in the infinite wisdom of God, why should we even think that it is necessary for him to change it? He knows what is best for us. Whatever he has allotted for us in our prarabdha is what is best for us. We may not understand how it is best for us, but whatever is allotted to us is what is best for us. So, of course, God can change it if appropriate, but it's highly unlikely that he would do so. And regarding God or Jnani, the Jnani is not a person. The Jnani is, as Bhagavan often used to say, Jnana me Jnani. The Jnani is nothing but Jnana itself. Jnana means pure awareness. Jnani means what knows pure awareness. What knows pure awareness is only pure awareness. So the Jnani and God, they're not two different things. That is, God is nothing but that same jnana, but seeming in our view to have a function, of allotting prarabdha and so on. But God does everything without doing anything. By the mere, as Bhagavan says in the 15th paragraph of Nana, all these divine functions, that is Shrishti, Sthiti, Samhara, Tirodhana, and Anugraha, that is creation, sustenance, dissolution, veiling, and grace. All these happen by the Isan Sanidana Visesha Matratal, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. That is, what God is infinite love. So by just being what he is, everything happens as it is meant to happen. So, of course, with our mind, our finite mind, we cannot adequately understand these things. But it's important to understand God is not a doer. Though everything is done by his mere being, by his being as he is, everything happens as it is meant to happen. So I hope that is an adequate answer to that question.
Yes, I think so, Mike. Thank you. The second question we have is from Sanjay Lohia. Could you please explain verse 20 of Upadesa Tanipakal, which is as follows? If the dove caught in the hand of the hunter is let free, it will fly away even from the forest in which it was caught, will it not? If asked thus, the reply is that when the hunter turning back home goes away from the forest leaving the dove, the dove will remain in the forest, since even that forest which was previously considered by it to be alien will be found to be its home.
Right. Okay. The story behind this verse A devotee called, I think his name was K.V. Ramachandran, if I remember correctly, but I'm not, I may be mistaken. He wrote a Kurul-vemba. The meaning of the Kurul-vemba is, if the dove caught in the hand of a hunter is let free, it will fly away even from a forest. So that is a statement. But it's an implied question. He says that, and he's asking for Bhagavan's confirmation. So that was written as a Kurul-vemba. Bhagavan extended the same verse to form a vemba. So after what K.V. Ramachandran had written, Bhagavan added the words enin. Enin means if it is said. So implying that is, though what K.V. Ramachandran wrote was a statement, Bhagavan took it as a question. Took it, but he's making a statement asking for Bhagavan's confirmation. So Bhagavan says, if you say like that, the reply is that is implied, that there's a lot of things implied. That is the literal meaning of the verses. Or the literal meaning of Bhagavan's reply is, if saying thus, when the hunter turning back home goes away, it will remain, since even that forest which was alien will be home. That's the literal meaning. We have to expand it, of course, to bring out the full meaning. So this is a metaphor, an analogy that is given here. In this analogy, the dove represents the jiva. The hunter represents Maya. And the forest is the body. So the jiva is residing in this body, is caught by Maya. That is the idea. So if Maya releases this jiva, if the hunter lets go of the bird will fly away even from the forest. What is implied here is that if we escape from Maya, we will leave the body. That is the idea. That is what the idea that was in Ramachandran's mind. And Bhagavan says, if it is said thus, my reply is, when the hunter, the words that have been translated as turning back home are, let's see, I'll just see the verse. I think it's aham nadi, or nadi aham. Nadi means seeking or approaching or investigating. It depends on the context in which it's used. Aham has a double meaning. Aham means, one meaning of aham is home. So in the context of the hunter, nadi aham means if the hunter seeking home or approaching home goes away. Veru ahala means if he departs, if he goes away. In other words, he's let go of the bird and he goes back home. But nadi aham also has a different meaning. Also has a deeper implication. Nadi means investigating, and aham means I. So if the hunters investigate, if that is, the hunter is Maya. And as Bhagavan often clarified, Maya is nothing but the mind or ego. So if ego, the Maya that has caught us, investigates itself, it will thereby veru ahala, it will depart. It will, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Tedinal otum pidikum. If seeking, it takes flight. If seeking means if ego seeks to know its own reality. In other words, if ego investigates who am I, it will take in autem pidicum means it will run away, it will take flight. So when the hunter investigates I, that is when the mind investigates itself, when ego investigates itself, it will thereby depart. That is autem pidicum. Taking flight is what Bhagavan implies here by veru ahala, when it goes elsewhere, when it goes away. That forest, which was alien, was something other than, taken to be something other than itself. That is, when we're following this spiritual path, we all now mistake this body to be I. But once we begin to follow this spiritual path, we are taught that this body is not I, this body is not what we actually are. And we're given so many reasons for understanding this. So when we're following this, this path of self-investigation, we are trying to separate ourselves from this body, understanding that though this body seems to be ourself, it is not what we actually are. So that's what Bhagavan implies by saying, Verana Akadum. Even that forest, which was Veru, is something other, something alien, something other than what we actually are. Vidai Odungi Vidum will be well, it's very that is the way it's expressed in Tamil is very difficult to translate in English. It literally means it will subside or dissolve away as home. The implication is, what Bhagavan is saying here, when we know what we actually are, this body which previously we understood to be something other than ourselves will be found to be nothing other than ourselves. Because what actually exists, as Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatatmai Ulludu Atma-sarupamandre. And then he goes on to explain that the world, soul, and God are just kalpana, they're mental fabrications in it, meaning in Swarupa. Just like the silver in the mother of pearl. So this body and world are nothing other than Atma-sarupa, because Atma-sarupa alone is what actually exists. What we now see as this body and world is actually nothing other than ourself. So long as we see it, we see all these things, we have to try to separate ourselves from these things, because the body and world are objects known by us. So we need to separate ourselves in order to experience ourselves as we actually are. Once we experience ourselves as we actually are, we will understand that what previously appeared to be the body and world is actually nothing other than Atma-sarupa. That is, what appeared to be all this multiplicity of phenomena is actually nothing other than the one Satchit, the one pure existence awareness. So the implication of this is that when we investigate I, and when ego is thereby departs, when it goes away, when it ceases to exist, everything that previously was taken to be alien, this body and world, previously taken to be alien, will then be seen to be nothing other than ourselves. That's a deeper implication, but yet at this more superficial level, because the idea that was in Ramachandran's mind is that when ego is destroyed, we will thereby leave the body. That was his idea. But Bhagavan said, no, the body itself will become home. Like Bhagavan says in verse 17 of Ulladu for those who do not know themselves, for those who have known themselves. That means for those who do not know themselves and for those who have known themselves, this body is actually I. This is for those who are familiar with Bhagavan's teachings, if we read this, this may be a surprise to us. If we read it the first time, what is this? Bhagavan says the body is, Bhagavan's fundamental teaching is this body is not I. But why is he saying here that he begins this verse, Udalnane, the body is actually I, or the body is only I, both for those who do not know themselves and for those who do know themselves. Why does he say this? He explains it in the next part. He says, Udalalave nan tan unaraku. That is, for those who do not know themselves, the limit of the body alone is I. That is, the body isn't, I is nothing other than this body. I is limited to the body. Whereas, he then goes on, Udal ulle tan unandaku, for those who have known themselves within this body, Eleyara tan olirum nan. That is, tan here means ourself, Atma-vichara, which shines without, Eleyara means without limit. It's infinite. It has no limits. That is I. So if I is the one pure awareness for which has no limits, since it's infinite, nothing can be other than it. So even this body cannot be other than I, is the implication. So for, as Sadhu Om often used to put it, for the Ajnani, the body alone is I. For the Jnani, the body is also I. That is, since I alone exists, whatever seems to exist cannot be other than I. So even this body is not other than I. So this is a very deep meaning, but it's important to note that the very important words here are eleyara. That means without limit. So whereas for the Ajnani, I is limited to the extent of the body. For the Jnani, I shines without any limit. Since it has no limit, there cannot be anything other than it. Because if the body were other than I, then I would thereby be limited. So the body cannot be anything other than I. That is the underlying reality of all that seems to exist, is that one fundamental awareness I am, which is Satchit, a pure being awareness. And then he goes on, he concludes the verse by saying, Iduve innava tam vedum ena en. Know that this alone is the difference between them. So for the Ajnani, I is limited to the body. For the Jnani, I is unlimited, and therefore nothing can be other than it. Therefore, the body is also I. So that is what Bhagavan is implying in this verse of Upadesha Tanipakal, this verse 20, is that since the body is nothing other than I, there's no reason why the body should why the body should die when we know ourselves. So, but of course, all this is only in the view of the Ajnani. In the view of the Jnani, there never was any body or world or anything. But so long as, from the perspective of an Ajnani, the body and world seem to be real, and then even the Jnani seems to be a body. That is, we take Bhagavan to be a person who lived for 54 years in Tiruvannamalai. That's our view of him. That's not his view of himself. His view of himself is his eye shines without limit. So for Bhagavan, there are no limitations. He is the one infinite paripurna vastu. But in our view, we mistake that paripurna vastu to be that small body that was limited in time and limited in space. But of course, though he seemed to be limited in time and limited in space, Bhagavan is never limited in any way whatsoever. But from the perspective of the Ajnani, it's quite possible for the body of the Jnani to continue living even after the death of even after the annihilation of ego. That is the idea of this verse. Is that clear, or does anyone have any further questions about this?
One slight this clarification. If the dove caught in the hand of the hunter is let free, so over here, Bhagavan is distinguishing between Jiva and Maya, but in Bhagavan's teachings, they are one.
Yeah. Okay, that is the question. That is not Bhagavan's answer. Bhagavan's answer is according to the question. So yes, it is, of course. It's the jiva is nothing other than ego, which is itself Maya. But since the question was framed in that way, or the statement was made in such terms, Bhagavan answered according to that. So this isn't the deepest teaching, because for Vijnani, Bhagavan makes it clear, for Vijnani there's no body or world or anything. There's only just Satchit, nothing other than Satchit, which is Vijnani itself. But this is all from the view of the onlooker. In the view of the onlooker, there is such a thing as Jiva Mukti. Jiva Mukti means liberation, even while the life is there in the body. But this is all only in the, as Bhagavan often clarified, this is all only in the view of the Ajnani. We see Bhagavan as a body. When Bhagavan at the age of 16, when he had that death experience, ego was completely annihilated. But the body continued to live for another 54 years after that. In whose view? In our view, not in his view.
It's a very difficult verse to understand. A lot of implications are there.
Yes, yes,
a lot of implications are there. It's not easy to understand this verse.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But if we understand the basic principles of Bhagavan's teaching, then all these things will be clear.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about this? No. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. The next question is from Tim. Is self-investigation the best way to overcome a particularly strong fear, as opposed to taking specific actions to try and overcome it?
Self-investigation, that is, so long as we rise as ego, having desire is the very nature of ego. And so long as we have desire, we will also have fear. Because we desire to live in this body, we fear death. Because we desire health, we fear sickness. Because we desire to be financially secure, we fear losing all our money. So all fears are right. That is, there is fear only when there is desire. If there's no desire or attachment, there will be no fear. So long as we rise as ego, desire and fear are inevitable to a greater or lesser extent. Of course, as we go deeper in this spiritual path, we become more detached. And so though the desires remain, they become less strong. And as the desires become less strong, the fears also become less strong. But we can eradicate desire and fear completely only by eradicating their root, namely ego. To whom are all these? To whom is desire? To whom is fear? Who is it who has desires? Who is it who has fears? It is I as ego. So self-investigation is the only way to eradicate ego. So ultimately, it's the only way to get rid of desire and fear. There may be other ways in which we can reduce the strength of our desires and correspondingly reduce the strength of our fears, but we cannot overcome them entirely by any means other than self-investigation. However, self-investigation, that is, self-investigation means turning our entire attention back within to see what we actually are. When we see what we actually are, ego is thereby destroyed, because ego is a false awareness of ourself, awareness of ourself as I am this body. So when we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, we can no longer mistake ourselves to be this body. So ego is annihilated by knowing ourselves as we actually are. So long as we have desires, strong desires and fears and everything, we will not be willing to surrender ourselves completely, because complete surrender is nothing but the dissolution of ego. If we're not willing to surrender ourselves, we won't be willing to go very deep in the path of self-investigation. So self-investigation will reduce the strengths of our desires and fears to the extent to which we go deep in the practice. Most of us are still not going very deep. We are dipping our toes in the water, so to speak. We're not plunging, immersing ourselves in the infinite ocean of Satchidananda. So our self-investigation is still relatively superficial. So it will take time for this, let's say, rather than saying superficial, shallow. For shallow self-investigation will take time to weaken our desires and fears. As our desires and fears get reduced in strength, we'll go deeper and deeper in this path of self-investigation. And eventually we'll go so deep, ego will be eradicated, and all desires and fears will obviously be eradicated along with it. So we shouldn't start self-investigation with an idea, this is going to be a therapy for my fear. That is, if we have strong fear, if we have any strong fear, that fear, it'll take time for that fear to reduce in strength. But there's no means as effective as self-investigation to weaken that fear. And eventually, I mean, there's no means other than self-investigation to eventually eradicate the fear altogether, by eradicating one to whom there is fear. So it's when we start off on this path of self-investigation, it's better to start off without expectations, without thinking, oh, if I do this, I'll overcome my desires, I'll overcome my fears, and so on. No, we are investigating ourselves to know what we actually are. When we know what we actually are, we'll thereby overcome all desires and fears. But if we're doing it just to be free of desire and fear, that's not going to take us very deep, because who wants to be free of desire and fear? It is I. That I is what needs to go. So we shouldn't be seeking any benefit for ourself as ego. We are seeking the eradication of ego by knowing ourselves as we actually are. So if we think that the purpose of our self-investigation is just to live without fear or live without desire, we are missing the point of what the self-investigation is about. Self-investigation is much deeper than just a therapy to reduce our desires and fears. Yes, if we go, the deeper we go in the path of self-investigation, the more our desires and fears will be weakened. But that is not the aim. That is not our aim when we're investigating ourselves. We're investigating ourselves to know who am I, to know what we actually are, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are. Once we're aware of ourselves as we actually are, obviously we'll be completely free of desire and fear, because what we actually are is infinite satisfaction, infinite ananda. So there'll be no desire and no fear. But so long as we rise as ego, desire and fear to a greater or lesser extent are inevitable. But if we really want to be free of desire and fear, there's no better way than self-investigation. Sorry, I didn't hear who had asked this question, but if the person who asked the question is here, is that a satisfactory answer? Is it a clear answer, or is there anything further you'd like to ask?
It was from Tim, and he sent it via email. I don't think he's here, Michael, but I hope he'll see that in the YouTube channel. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
The next question we have is from Yali. My question is about gratitude. Expressing gratitude or looking for things to be grateful for seems contradictory to turning inward, unless the gratitude is for what allows me to turn inwards or what incites me to turn inwards. In that case, is every moment one of gratitude for the ability to turn inward? Please clarify the concept of gratitude. When I catch myself saying I am thankful for this or that, I have awareness that I'm looking out instead of in.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, we need to. What we are seeking is what we already have. But of course, we are grateful. For example, we're grateful to Bhagavan for bringing us to this path. Though we may not be following this path so deeply or so perfectly yet, we understand that this path is the supreme treasure. This is such a precious thing that Bhagavan has given us. So of course we're grateful to him. But gratitude is not the main thing. I mean, that's not, Bhagavan doesn't want our gratitude. Bhagavan wants us just to be happy. And we can be happy only by not rising as ego. And in order to not rise as ego, we need to investigate ourselves. While talking about gratitude, there's one thing Bhagavan said, which is relevant here. He said, the trouble with us, that Bhagavan often would take himself along with those he's talking to. Rather than saying the trouble with you, he'll say the trouble with us. But obviously, he's not referring to himself, he's referring to us. He said, the trouble with us is that we thank God for the things that we think are good. We forget to thank him for all the things that we think are bad. In other words, what Bhagavan is saying, whatever happens in our life is what is good for us. So even if we're sick, even if we are in poverty, even if we are terminally ill, whatever it may be, even if we suffer bereavement, even whatever it may be, it's all given to us for our own good. So according to Bhagavan, we should be grateful for everything, both the things that we take to be good and the things that we take to be bad. But you're right. I think gratitude is not the main. It's not the main. We can understand gratitude in the light of Bhagavan's teachings, but it's not what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Because ultimately, as Bhagavan made clear, if Bhagavan was giving us anything that we do not already possess, whatever comes will ultimately go. That's why Bhagavan often used to say, if jnana were a new knowledge to be attained, one day it would be lost. Because whatever comes will inevitably go. But jnana is our own real nature. So Guru is not giving us anything that we do not already possess. Guru is just making us see that we already have everything that we are seeking. We're all seeking infinite and eternal happiness. That is our very nature. That's what we actually are. But Guru enables us to see that.
Thank you.
Is that a clear and satisfactory answer to your question?
Yeah, it was very beautiful. The explanation that whatever we see as good or bad, to be grateful because everything is perfect as it is.
Exactly.
And that's very beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's sometimes said Ishwara Shrishti is perfect. The creation of God is perfect. But the problem lies in Jiva Drishti, in the outlook of the Jiva. That is, who says that things in this world are good and bad? It's us. Why do we say some things are good and other things are bad? It's according to our likes and dislikes. But everything is just as it is. We think disease is bad, death is bad, famine is bad, wars are bad, pandemics are bad. That's why do we judge all these things as bad? Because we don't like them. But that's why Bhagavan says in Nana, well, he says it in a slightly different context, but it applies here also. In the context in Nana, he says, however bad others may appear to be, it is not appropriate to dislike them. Likes and dislikes are both to be disliked. Ultimately, the world is just as it is. It's we who say, oh, this is good, this is bad, this is a good person, this is a bad person, I like this person, I don't like that person. It's all our own likes and dislikes. So the problems we face are not problems in the external world. The problems lie in our own likes and dislikes. And likes and dislikes are inevitable so long as we rise as ego. So if we want to be free of all likes and dislikes, we need to be free of this I that has likes and dislikes.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
The next question we have is from Saujanya. Disciplined sadhana seems to be a common factor among so many realized souls. How to discipline oneself when there is so much bodily inertia to overcome, even when the mind wants to continue sadhana? Example, when trying to get out of bed to practice alone at home, it seems easier to do this in a controlled and high energy environment like ashram, but not so easy to do it consistently at home.
Well, it's all a matter of if we have love for something, we will automatically, if we really had love to know what we actually are, we would love to investigate ourselves. We'd love to keep our attention fixed on ourselves. But most in practice, when we try to turn our attention back towards ourselves, we find how little love we actually have for this. So it's not so much a matter of discipline. Discipline will come automatically if we have a love for it. If you have a love, some people, for example, great musicians, in order to become masters of whatever instrument they're playing, they need to practice and practice and practice. So to outward appearances, it appears that they're living a very disciplined life. They're spending so many hours a day practicing their musical instrument. But for them, it's not discipline. They're doing it because they love it. They want to become ever more perfect at that, at playing that musical instrument. So it's not very helpful to think in terms of discipline. It's better to think in terms of love. And if we find that we are not attending to ourselves enough, it's because we don't have enough love for this. So rather than trying to force ourselves, oh, I must sit 20 minutes morning and evening to attend to myself, if we try and impose an external discipline, a discipline in terms of time and all these things, it's not going to be very effective. Because even when we set aside 20 minutes to sit and try to attend to ourselves, if we don't have love to attend to ourselves, our mind will be going here and there. So what is required is love. With love, the discipline comes automatically with love. Do we have to discipline ourselves to eat every day? No, we all like to eat because we know if we go for a few days without food, we'll be feeling hungry and the mind will be thinking so much about food. So that is because we need food for survival. It's natural for us to like food. So we don't find it that it's something that we have to discipline ourselves to have to eat every day. So many other things like that. We do things that we like very naturally. So it's not so much a matter of discipline as a matter of having love for. If we truly love to surrender ourselves to and to be as we actually are, we will love to attend to ourselves more and more, because the more we attend to ourselves, the more we subside. If we find that we are finding every excuse to think about something else other than attending to ourselves, which is the case with most of us, it shows the deficiency of our love. But we can cultivate that love only by patient and persistent practice. So persistence is necessary, but the persistence is to be motivated by love, not by a rigid discipline, because discipline is something that we try to impose upon ourselves. It's not natural. Love is natural.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Do you agree with what I say? Is it clear about what I say?
It is
Yes.
actually, because when you said it this way, I find it easier when I have to wake up and care for somebody else, like
Yes.
say my child, but
Yes.
I find it more difficult when it comes to attending to myself.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
so
Because it's natural for a parent to have love for the child. So the parents don't feel they're making great sacrifices for their children. They're doing it out of love.
Thank you.
Right.
Can I ask a question, Michael?
Yes, certainly.
I just spent a couple of months in Tiruvannamalai and lucky enough to be at Deepam, staying at Rama Ashram. They extended my stay for Ramana's Jayanti. And when I was sitting at the old hall, the fifth verse of Atma-vichara keep coming back. It was so deep to me, like Manakanukku kannai, Manavinnuku vinnai, Oruborol, வேறென்னாது இருந்தபடி உள்நாடு உள்ளத்தில் ஒளிரும் அண்ணாமலையின் ஆன்மா காணுமே. That உள்நாடு was so deep. Can you please again for us to refresh? I also read your Atma-vichara book. It's so beautifully translated. As you know, I can only speak Tamil, but classical Tamil I'm not as good.
Yes.
So your translation was on the point. I was so humbled by your expertise in this. Can you please share again, especially the fifth verse of Atma-vichara?
Okay, it's a very, very beautiful verse. He's describing our real nature, which is what is called Annamalai. And he says it shines as Vinadia Vilakum, Kannadia Porikum, Kannam Manakannaku Kannai. Manakannaku Kannai means as the eye to the mind eye. Here, I means I. For those who don't know Tamil, kan means not I as not the pronoun I, but the organ of sight, the eye, the physical, or EYE. So it's the eye to the mind eye. That means it is the underlying awareness, the pure awareness that illumines the mind, enabling the mind to know all other things. So he says, it's the eye to the mind eye, and he describes the mind eye as the mind eye is the eye to the five senses, beginning with the eye. That is, the five senses. The five senses are just windows through which we receive information. What is it that is seen through the eyes, hearing through the ears, tasting through the tongue, and so on, is the mind. So our real nature, Atma, is what shines as the eye to the mind eye, which is the eye to the five senses, beginning with eye, which illumine vinadya vilakum, means it illumines what begins with space. In other words, it illumines this material world that consists of space. Well, the traditional thing is that it consists of five elements: space, air, fire, earth, and water. Water and earth, sorry. These are the traditional how the world is understood. It's made up of these five elements. But that's beside the point. The point is the world. The world occupies physical space. This physical space and everything in this physical space is known through the five senses. What knows through the five senses is the mind. And what illumines the mind, enabling it to know all these things, is the underlying pure awareness, which is anamale enanma. Anamale, which is, self, which is called anamale. And then he also describes it. It's not only the eye to the mind eye, it's also mana vinnakum vinnai. It's the space to the mind space. That is the physical space exists where? What is the space in which the physical space appears? It is only the mind space. That is, we think of this universe as so vast, consisting of so many, it's existed for such a long time and it's occupied such a huge space. It's so many immeasurable, the size of this, of the vast space in which this universe is contained. But all that vast space is contained within the mind space, because it's all, what knows all this world and all this physical space and everything in it is only the mind. So the all physical space, Buddhakasa, is contained within Manakasa, the mind space. Or as he put it in Tamil, Manavin, that's the mind space. So what is the space in which this mind space appears? Is the space of pure awareness. So it's very, very, the implication here is very deep. So it is the space in which the mind space appears, in which in turn the physical space appears. It is, he also described it as oruporo, the one substance, the one reality, the one thing that all things ultimately actually are. Poro is a Tamil equivalent of Sanskrit word vastu, which means substance, not in the sense of a material substance, but in the sense of a metaphysical substance, what all things ultimately actually are. Because all phenomena are forms. You can't have a form without some substance. For example, if you've got so many gold ornaments, rings and bangles and necklaces and whatnot, all those different forms have no existence independent of the gold. If you take away the gold, the form ceases to exist. So all forms depend upon a substance. So just like gold is the substance of all gold ornaments, or everything made of gold, the ultimate substance is Satchit, pure being awareness, which is Anamala and Amma. So that is what he refers to as the Oruporul, the one substance, the one reality of all these things. And then he says, that's his description of Anma. And he says, Anamala en Anma. That en can be taken in two senses. It can mean Anamala enum Anma. That is self, which is what is called Anamala. But it also has another meaning, Anamala myself. That is, Bhagavan is indirectly indicating here that Anamala is nothing other than himself. So how to experience this Anma? How can we see it as it is? Though we ourselves are this Atma, this is our own reality, but so long as we're looking outwards, we seem to be ego. So how to experience this, he explains here. Enadu. Enadu means, Veru enadu. Not thinking of anything else. In other words, not attending to anything other than ourselves. Irundapadi, as it is. Ulnadu. Investigating within. So this Atma shines in the heart as this Anma, which is called Anamala, which is the one substance, shines in the heart as the eye to the mind eye, which is the eye to the five senses beginning with eye, which what illumine the everything beginning with space. In other words, what illumine all physical phenomena. The physical phenomena exist only in the view of the mind, and the mind knows them through the five senses. So it is this Anamala is the pure awareness that gives light to the mind. In other words, it lends its awareness to the mind, enabling the mind to know all these things. And it is the space to the mind space, which is the space to the physical space. And how can we experience it? By not thinking of anything else, but just investigating within, and thereby being inwardly investigating, and thereby being as it is. Being as it is means being as we are, because Atma means ourself. It's not, Atma is not something other than ourself. It's what we actually are. So that Atma will be seen when we, that is, when we, without thinking of anything else, when we just remain as we actually are by inwardly investigating, implying investigating who am I, investigating what we actually are, we will thereby see Atma, which is the eye to the mind eye and the space to the mind space. And then he says, for this, what is needed above all else? Arulum Vainame. Grace is also necessary. That is, Arulum can, that can mean also, or even, but it can also be taken just as a poetic expletive. That is something just added for poetry. But the main thing is, he said grace is necessary. Why? Because the nature of ego is to, that is, we, as he says in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, ego rises, stands, and flourishes by attending to things other than itself. That's what he implies. The actual, how he words it is, urupatriundam, grasping form, it comes into existence. Urupatri Nikkam, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri Undu Mika Ongam, grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu Urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. What he means by grasping form, that is, all forms are things other than ourselves, because he describes ego in that verse as Uruvatra Payahande, the formless demon ego. So this demon ego is formless. It's got no form of its own. Having no form of its own, it's got no separate existence of its own. So it comes into existence by limiting itself to a form. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project a body and experience that body as I. And we cannot stand for a moment as ego without continuing to identify that body as I, to experience that body as I. So in the first two sentences, Urupatri Undam, Urupatri Nekam, grasping form, it comes into existence, grasping form, it stands. There, the form he's referring to is the form of the body, which, as he says in verse 5, is a Udal Panchakosa Uru. The body is a form composed of 5 sheaths. So he's not referring just to the physical body, but to all the 5 sheaths. That is the physical body, the life that animates it, the mind, intellect, and will that operate within it. These are called the 5 sheaths. We experience these collectively as I, when we rise as ego. So we cannot rise or stand as ego without experiencing this body as I. But having experienced this body as I, we don't stop there. We then are constantly dwelling on things other than ourselves. Everything other than ourselves, all objects or phenomena, are forms of one kind or another. Now, by forms, he doesn't just mean physical forms. It includes thoughts, feelings, ideas. Everything are forms of one kind or another. All phenomena are forms. So the dwelling on forms is the food that on which ego lives. It depends on constantly attending to things other than itself in order to survive. So the very nature of ego is to have desire to experience forms, to experience phenomena, to be aware of things other than itself. Because if it's not aware of any phenomena, it ceases to be ego. So since the nature of ego is to have desire, likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on, the seeds of which are what are called Vishaya Vasanas. Vasanas means inclinations. Vishayas means phenomena. What he refers to in that verse as Uru, form, what can also be called Vishayas. So all objects or phenomena are called Vishayas. So the inclination to dwell on Vishayas, to constantly attend to Vishayas, to seek happiness in Vishayas, they are called Vishaya Vasanas. So these Vishaya Vasanas are the seeds that give rise to likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So it's the very nature of the mind to have Vishaya Vasanas, and consequently likes, dislikes, desires, and hopes and fears. The first question was about fear. It's all this comes from Vishaya Vasanas. Which it's very, Vishaya Vasanas are not ego, but it's the nature of ego to have Vishaya Vasanas, because the ego cannot survive for a moment without constantly holding on to Vishayas or forms. So since the nature of ego is to always go outwards, the love to turn within is not the nature of ego. So that love to turn within doesn't come from ego. It comes only from our real nature, because our real nature, what he refers to here as Anamale Anma, that is, since that alone exists, and since it loves itself as it is infinite love, because there's nothing other than itself. So it just loves itself as it is. So that love that we as we actually are, have for ourselves as we actually are, is what we as ego experience as grace. That is, that grace is always leading us back to our real nature, which is infinite happiness. So grace is absolutely essential. If it wasn't for grace, we wouldn't be attracted to this path at all. We wouldn't have any liking to turn our attention within. So even if whatever little love we have, little love or great love we have to turn within, it's all the shiny of grace in our heart that gives us that love to turn within. Then, so in the next sentence, he says, ambu puname. Grace is, first he says grace is necessary, then he says, ambu puname. Puname means, literally it means adorn. We should adorn ourselves with love. In other words, we should cherish that love. That love to turn within is the most precious thing. That is the gift of Bhagavan's grace. Whatever love we have to turn within is entirely the result of Bhagavan's grace. Because, as I said, it's contrary to the nature of ego. The nature of ego is to like to go outwards. The love to turn within comes only from grace, from the infinite love that Bhagavan has for us as himself. Because Bhagavan doesn't see us as other than himself, so he loves us as himself. So Bhagavan's love was equal to all, because what he loves is not the individual that we take ourselves to be. He loves our reality. He loves what we actually are, and he sees us as that. So his seeing us as we actually are is what gives us the love to see ourselves as we actually are. So grace and love are both essential, and the love comes only from the grace. And so if we cultivate that love, we will then turn within and see ourselves as we actually are, and the final result is imbu torname. Happiness will appear. Happiness, that is our true nature, which is infinite happiness, will shine as it actually is.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I also,
it is a very, very beautiful verse.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to end the 5 verses, and it
Yes.
nail caffeine. And what I was also amazed was, ஒரு பொருள் வேற என்னாது இருந்தபடி உள்நாடு. Nadu means seeking, going within.
Yes.
Or outside. It has so many meanings. It's
Yes,
so
yes.
beautiful.
That is, we can't be as we actually are without attending to ourselves. Because so long as we're attending to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding ego and rising. So in order to be as we actually are, we need to subside. And in order to subside, we need to investigate ourselves. Bhagavan makes this clear in verse 27 of Ulladu. This is also a very, very beautiful verse. Nanudiada ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. That means the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are as that. That is our reality. We are that. We are Brahman. That here refers to Brahman. So that is what we actually are. But we don't experience ourselves as such because we've risen as ego. So in order to experience ourselves as we actually are, the only way is to cease rising as ego. So to be in that state of just being without rising, that is the state of being as we actually are. So how to be in that state of not rising? He makes clear in the next sentence. Next sentence is a question, but it's a rhetorical question. He says, nan udikum tanam ade nadamo. That means without investigating the place where I rises. When he talks about, Bhagavan often uses the word place in a metaphorical sense. He's not talking literally about a place in time and space. The place where I rises, or what he refers to in Nana as Pirapidum, the mind, the birthplace of the mind, or the Udita Iditil. He says in verse 10 of Upadesha Undya, Udita Iditil Odungi Iratal. That is, being having subsided in the place from which we rise. The place here means the source. So what is the source from which we rise? It is only the pure I, the pure awareness of being, I am. In other words, our own being is the place from which we've risen. So we need to, without investigating that place from which we've risen, in other words, without investigating our own being, nan udiya tanirape sabadu evan. How to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. That is, in the first sentence when he says, nanudiya de ulinile, the state in which I is without rising, he's not just talking about a state of manolaya, like sleep. In sleep, I is without rising. But that's only a temporary state. What he's talking about here is not manolaya, but manonasa, the state in which I never rises. As he makes clear in this sentence by saying, how to reach the annihilation of oneself, tanirape, in which I does not rise. So this is what we are seeking. We're seeking the annihilation of ourself. And how to reach that annihilation, in other words, how to achieve the annihilation of ourself, he puts it as a question, how to do so, without investigating the place where I rise. That clearly implies the only way to achieve the annihilation of ourself is to investigate our own being, which is the place from which we've risen as ego. And without reaching then in the next sentence he says, saramo. Saramo means without reaching. Because in the previous sentence he said, tanirape savadu, reaching the annihilation of oneself. Saramal here implies without reaching that annihilation of ourself. In other words, without achieving self-annihilation, manonasa, Tanaduam tannilayil nipadu evan. How to stand in one's own state in which oneself is that. Satru, say. So here he makes clear that the only way to be as we actually are is to not rise as ego. And the only way to not rise as ego is to investigate the place where I rises. Because as he explained earlier, this is verse 27, 2 verses earlier, verse 25, he, after saying that ego, grasping form it comes into existence, grasping form it stands, grasping and feeding on forms it flourishes abundantly, leaving form it grasps form. After saying that, he then says, Tedinal otum pidicum. Tedinal literally means if seeking. It doesn't specify who is seeking or what is being sought, but in the context it means if ego seeks its own reality, if ego seeks to know who am I. In other words, instead of grasping form, if ego tries to grasp itself, what happens? Otum pidicum. It runs away, it takes flight. So the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to forms or phenomena, in other words, things other than itself, but to subside by attending to itself. So that's why he asks here, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. So the clear implication is the only way to achieve that annihilation, that state in which we just are without rising, just being without rising, the only way is to investigate the place where I rises. And the place where I rises is our own being. So in order to be as we actually are, we need to hold on to our being. We need to attend only to our being. To the extent to which we attend to our being, we, this rising I called ego, subside and eventually we dissolve back into our own being. That's why he says in this verse of Ulnadu, investigating within, Veru Enadu, not thinking of anything else. Irundapadi Ulnadu, investigating within, being as it is. Irundapadi means as it is, as we actually Irunda is a past tense, as we were. That means as we always have been, as we that is our natural state. This Veranadu is reminiscent of a verse of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 25, which Bhagavan has translated as, I think, verse 27 of Bhagavad Gita Saram. In the original, Krishna says, Atma samstam manakritva, make the mind fixed on self, fixed on yourself. In other words, fix the mind on yourself. Atma samstam manakritva, kinchitapi chintayat. Now, kinchitapi chintayat. Do not think of anything else. In Tamil, Bhagavan says it very, very beautifully. Chittate anma vilsa tidaka. Fix the mind in self or on self. Matredavam. Anything else. Ittanayam, even the slightest. Ennidade. Do not think even in the slightest of anything else. That is what he refers to in this verse as Veru Enadu, not thinking of anything else. Thinking of anything other than ourselves means attending to that. We shouldn't attend to anything other than our own being. Ulnadu means turning the attention within. What is within? Only our own being. Obviously the word within is a relative term. If relative to the body, within means all the heart and the liver and all the other organs that are in the body. That's at the grossest level. But within doesn't mean that. It means within the mind. But within the mind, in the grosser sense, means within the mind there are thoughts and feelings and emotions and the functioning of the intellect and the will and all these things. But no, Bhagavan is talking, when he says seeking within, it's still deeper within. Within, not within the mind, but within ourself. What is within ourself, because we are the heart, what is the ultimate heart? The ultimate heart, what is within the ultimate heart is only the heart. Because if there was something other than the heart in the heart, that other thing would be the heart of the heart. But the ultimate heart is what is, when we go deep within, what we find is only ourself and nothing other than ourself. What is within ourself is only ourself. So when he says Ulnadu, he means investigating so deep within that we attend to nothing other than ourselves. That's why he says Veru Enadu, without thinking of anything else. All thoughts, feelings, emotions, all these mental phenomena, these are all things other than ourselves. Obviously, all the objects of this world are other than ourselves. We shouldn't think of anything other than Atma, our own being. And by attending only to our own being, we thereby are being as we actually are. Nanu diada ullanile, nana duvai ullanile. By attending to ourselves, we don't rise as I. By not rising as I, we are being as we actually are. He also says it in Upadesha, in verse 8 of Upadesha, because he was talking about the path of bhakti, and he talks about that is when we start on the path of bhakti, we start expressing our love for God by actions of body, speech, and mind, and we are because we're expressing love for God, we are not doing it to gain anything from God. So what Bhagavan is talking about in verse 3, he says about nishkamya karma. And then when he begins to, what are the types of nishkamya karma we can do? We've got 3 instruments of action, body, speech, and mind. So the actions we do for the love of God without expecting any reward, that is nishkamya puja. And what we do by speech is nishkamya japa, and what we do by mind is nishkamya dhyana. That's what he's talking about in verses 4, 5, 6, 7, there. But in so up to that point, up to the point of verse 7, it's all about action, about expressing our love for God through action. But in verse 8, he says, rather than anya bhava, ananya bhava, in which he is I, is best among all. So what does he mean by anya bhava and ananya bhava? Anya means what is other. So in the context, the implication of anya bhava means meditating on what is other. In the context, it implies meditating on God as other than ourselves. So long as we meditate on God as a name or form, that name or form is something other than ourselves. That is good. Bhagavan is not decrying that. He's saying that is good. But better than that, best of all, is rather than that anya bhava is ananya bhava. Ananya means what is not other. Bhava in this context means meditation. So meditating on what is not other means what? It means meditating on ourself alone. And why do we meditate on ourself alone? Because we have the understanding avanahamahum. He is I. So with the understanding that he is I, we meditate on nothing other than ourselves. That is what Bhagavan calls avanahamahum ananya bhavam. And that, he says, is natina mutama. It's best among all. So what he implies there by ananya bhava is self-attentiveness, not attending to anything other than ourselves. But why do we attend to nothing other than ourselves? Because we understand that God is nothing other than I. That is the reality of I is God. The swarupa of God, the real nature of God, is Atma-swarupa, the real nature of ourselves. So we attend to nothing other than ourselves. And then in verse 9, he said, this verse 9 is very, very important verse. He says, bhava balatinal, by the strength of meditation. The implication is, in the context, by the strength of that ananya bhava. So an ananya bhava means self-attentiveness. So and bhava balatinal implies by the strength of self-attentiveness. Bhavanatita satbhavatu iritale. Iritale means just being. Satbhavatu means in satbhava. Satbhava is the state of being, our natural state of just being as we actually are. And that state of being, he describes as bhavanatita, transcending or beyond bhavana. In this context, what he implies by bhavana is mental activity. That is, so long as we're meditating on God as something other than ourselves, that is a mental activity. Because our mind, our attention is moving from ourselves to that beloved name or form of God. So that is still a mental activity. It's a bhavana. But if we remain just in pure being, we go beyond all bhavana. We transcend bhavana. And he said, being in that sat-bhava, that state of being, is parabhakti tattva. That is the very nature of supreme devotion. So this path of self-investigation is not an alternative path to the path of bhakti. It is the culmination of the path of bhakti. It is the blossoming, the culmination of the path of bhakti, the flowering of the path of bhakti, where bhakti eventually leads. Because in the path of bhakti, what are we ultimately trying to do? We're trying to give ourselves to God. Give ourselves to God means surrender ourselves completely to God. So long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are rising as something, as something, as ego. And as ego, we seem to be separate from God. So if we want to give ourselves entirely to God, we have to attend to ourselves alone. So by the strength of that self-attentiveness, we subside back into this state of Satbhava, our natural state of just being. And being in that state of Satbhava, by implication, without rising as ego, that is Parabhakti Tattva. That is why? Because it's a state of complete surrender. We've given ourselves entirely to God by not rising. So Bhagavan so beautifully, he blends the bhakti and jnana, because as Bhagavan made so clear, there can be no, he often said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. There cannot be true jnana, there cannot be true, we cannot know ourselves as we actually are without all-consuming love. And bhakti without jnana is still immature bhakti. It hasn't yet blossomed. When the bhakti matures and comes to a point of complete surrender, when we give ourselves entirely to God, what then remains is jnana, which is the very nature of God. God is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, as it says in the, well, in the Upanishad, it doesn't say God, it says Brahman, but Brahman is what God actually is. And it is described as Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. It's the reality, it's what actually exists, Satyam. It is Jnanam, pure awareness, and it is Anantam, it's infinite, without any limit. So the Bhakti and Jnana are not two alternative paths. That is, through the path of the preliminary stages of the path of bhakti, our love for God is matured. When that love for God becomes mature, we then recognize God is not something other than myself. If God is anantam, if he's infinite, how can I be anything other than God? As Bhagavan says in verse 7 of Arunachapattikam. Who is this I who rises another? If all these elements that make up this world and everything that is made of those elements, if none of them are apart from you, who is this I who rises as if another? And then he prays to Arunachal to come out, to manifest himself, planting his feet on the head of this ego. So it's all about annihilation of ego. That is, in the early stages of the path of bhakti, we take God to be something other than ourselves. Because God is so great, how can I be God? But as our love matures, the mind is purified and more clarity comes. And then we understand, how can I be anything other than God? If God alone is what actually exists, how can I be anything other than God? So by rising as ego, I'm usurping what is rightfully belongs to God. Bhagavan used to give the analogy of the poor wayfarer who wouldn't eat his food without doing puja to Ganapati. One day he didn't have his little vigraha of Ganapati to do his puja, so he had a little velum, a little jaggery, and he made a form of Ganapati out of that jaggery and worshipped it. But then he wanted to make an offering to Ganapati, but that jaggery he had kept in order to make as an offering. So how to make an offering when he's made the whole jaggery he's made into Ganapati? So he pinched the toe off Ganapati and offered it. Bhagavan said, our surrendering ourselves to God is like that. This I is nothing but we've usurped what is rightfully belongs to God. And then we say, I surrender myself to you. Who are we? Who am I to surrender myself? That is, what is this I other than God? So in the complete surrender, we are just restoring to God what is rightfully his by ceasing to rise as ego and just being as we actually are.
Beautiful. Yeah. So only thing which is not God created is our ego. That's the only thing we can offer to the God.
Yes, yes. And even that ego doesn't belong to us. We have taken this ego. We have that is ego is the false awareness. I am Suresh. I am Michael. That I am is God. We have usurped that I am, claiming it to be ourselves, identifying it with this little person we take ourselves to be. And then we say, I want to surrender myself. We are just returning to God what is always God's, namely that pure awareness I am, that is always God's. When we as ego subside, this Suresh or Michael will dissolve, and what will remain is the pure I am, which alone is God.
Thank you so much, Michael. You inspire me so much with your love and passion. Bhagavan's teaching. Bhagavan is shining through you.
Well, I don't know. I'm the most unfit vessel for this. I totally lack this love that is required to turn within, but somehow Bhagavan has attracted, by his infinite grace, he's attracted me to his teachings. He's given me a love for his teachings. And my only prayer is one day he'll give me the true love to surrender myself completely to him.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana.
Thank you, Michael. I think that was the last question that we had. So
Yeah.
will we conclude the session?
Yes. Okay.
One question can I ask, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
So, sir, recently I came to know that Sadhu Om used to live a life like a wandering sadhu for a few months every year.
Yes.
He used to beg his food during this period. Is it correct?
At a certain time, yes. During the, particularly in between 1950 and 1955, that period, he often used to go for parivrajika life.
What was the motivation? Means, is it, why was he doing it?
He understood, but Bhagavan highly recommended that type of life for his sadhu devotees. Bhagavan himself lived on begged food. Well, all his life. Bhagavan didn't never own it. Bhagavan was a pitchandi. He's a beggar. He never claimed anything as his own. So in the early days, when Bhagavan was living in Tiruvannamalai, well, for the first few years, he was completely oblivious of the body, and so people had to bring food to him. Later, he used to go, and Bhagavan said, there's not a street in Tiruvannamalai where I haven't begged food. So Bhagavan lived as beggar. Later, when more devotees came around him, the devotees would go out begging the food and would bring the food. But Bhagavan lived on, well, even when they came down to the foot of the hill and the ashram was built up and it became, and so many donations were coming and the kitchen had started and everything, even then Bhagavan considered the food he was eating as bhiksha, as that begs, I mean, the food that he was given, he took it as bhiksha. Bhiksha means not in the sense that it's of nowadays in Ramana, well, even in Bhagavan's days in Ramana ashram, bhiksha meant if someone gives a big donation to the ashram, there'll be a feast. And that feast they call bhiksha. But that's not the original meaning of the term bhiksha. Bhiksha means the food that is begged and received as begged food. So Bhagavan lived that lifestyle. Bhagavan encouraged his devotees to live that lifestyle. So Sadhu Om, not all devotees, obviously, but for the Sadhu devotees, Murugan, for many, many years, Murugan, when the ashram dining hall bell rang, Murugan would get up and go to the town and beg his food. One day when Murugan was, Murugan wouldn't even take a begging bowl. He would just have a cloth over his shoulder, and he would, whatever food was offered, he would receive in the cloth, and he would tie it in the cloth and return home, and to eat his food. One day when he was returning after begging his food, it was a very hot day, and he swooned and fell, and all the food got spilt. And when this was reported to Bhagavan, Bhagavan said, why should he beg his food? Why not he have food here? Something like that. Murugan, that was reported to Murugan many, many years later, in the final years of Murugan's lifetime. Murugan, for towards the end of his life, he was living in, there was a house opposite the ashram built by Dr. T.N. Krishnaswamy. That house, Murugan was living in that house for many years, but towards the end, when his health was deteriorating, Hugo, who was a German homeopath, and various other people said, we can take care of Murugan's medical needs better if he's in the ashram. So they prevailed on the ashram management to ask Murugan to come back to the ashram. And at that time, Murugan decided, yes, Bhagavan said then, that is, Murugan told Sadhu Om, Bhagavan, in those days, when I swooned and fell and all my food was spilt, Bhagavan said, why not he take food here? I take that, those words of Bhagavan were meant for now. So I will accept this invitation to come to the ashram. So for the last 2 years or so, he lived in the ashram, in a room just in the, there's a building which was built originally as the ashram dispensary. He stayed in that building, and all his medical needs were taken care of there.
So we don't see any wandering sadhus in our towns and cities. It is, why is it so? Means if there are sadhus, where are they? Where are they roaming around?
If you want to find sadhus, go to Prayagraj. You'll find tens of thousands. Sadhus are everywhere. If you go to any big temple, you'll see sadhus sitting in the temple. But sadhus everywhere. I mean, it's...
But they don't come to the house. They will not come to the house.
They don't. Well, in big cities, because the things have changed a lot in India. It's nearly 50 years since I first came to India, and things have changed so much since then. Even 30 years ago, when I was living in Tiruvannamalai, we had when I first came to Tiruvannamalai, there wasn't even television. The first television came to Tiruvannamalai. I remember Sadhu Om and we were invited through a friend to the house of someone who lived near the temple. They had a television. We were invited there because for the time of Bhagavan's, to celebrate Bhagavan's birth centenary in 1980, Doordarshan, which was then the only television company, had made a documentary film about Bhagavan's life. So through a friend of a friend, we were invited to someone's house. That was the only house at that time in Tiruvannamalai that had a television. That would have been about 1980 or 81. And later, when this Mahabharata and Ramayana were, first Ramayana, Ramananda Sagar's Ramayana, and then later Mahabharata, when they were broadcast, then television became very popular and everyone wanted to have a television. Even in villages, all the villagers would pool their money, resources together to buy a television just to watch Ramayana. it was a wonderful time to be in India at that time because people loved that so much. So technology was only just beginning to come. And by the time I left, shortly before I left Tiruvannamalai, it's in 1996, I first heard about a fax. When someone said, you can fax something, I said, what is a fax? So even fax was a new technology at that time. There was no such thing as, nobody knew anything about computers. Some young people were studying software engineering in some IIT and such places, but most people had no idea what is a computer or anything. Now, how much things have changed. So obviously the sadhus don't generally go to big cities. They maybe if you go to major temples that are in big cities, like in Chennai, for example, there's the Mylapore temple. That's quite an important temple. I'm sure there are some sadhus there. But generally sadhus will congregate in places like Tiruvannamalai and places where there are big temples, sacred places. And yeah, all over India, there are so many kshetras, and you'll always find sadhus in such places.
So when you first came to India, and for about a year or two, you were going around India.
Yes.
So, like, what did you learn at that time? What was your lessons? Because besides the Ramana teaching,
I didn't know about Bhagavan when I came. I was looking for something, but I didn't know what I was looking for. So I didn't understand things, but I was very interested. So I visited so many places: Kedarnath, Badrinath, Amarnath, so many places. I couldn't go to Gangotri in those days because it was closed to foreigners, but I went to Yamunotri, so many places in North India, and I traveled around visiting places. When I was in the Himalayas, I didn't take bus. I would walk everywhere. So I was walking with sadhus from Rishikesh up to Kedarnath, and then from Kedarnath to Badrinath. So I was very young. I was a teenager when I first came to India. So it was all something very new, something very. I was fascinated by it, but I didn't understand anything. But it all became clear only after I came to Bhagavan. Then the place that all this temple worship and all these things, the place that it has, the relevance of it became clear only after coming to Bhagavan.
so those sadhus whom you met,
Yeah.
were they genuine spiritual aspirants? Or what?
Who can say? You get all types of sadhus. Some are pucker rogues, they're out to cheat people. Some are good pious people living simple life. A lot in North India, in places like Rishikesh and all the up in the Himalayas, a lot of them are ganja smokers. They smoke this ganja and everything. So some I think are not so. Well, who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? There are all types of sadhus. I met some very nice, very good people. There's some good sadhus who were, I think, very genuine, each in their own way, very genuine spiritual aspirants. But who are we to judge others? But sadhus, the whole spectrum of humanity you'll find among sadhus.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Right. So why Bhagavan made me do all that before coming to Tiruvannamalai, I don't know. Perhaps it was Bhagavan wanted to give me exposure to all that, and but only when I came to Tiruvannamalai and when I read Who Am I, then I knew this is what I've been looking for. Before that, I knew I was looking for something, but I didn't know what. I knew vaguely I was looking for something spiritual. But what is spiritual, I had no idea until I came to Bhagavan.
I think, sir, Bhagwan gave you a strong footing on the with this Indian culture in the 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, it was
Overall scene in India.
yeah. But most of what I learned
Hmm.
about Indian culture and about uh, the Mahabharata, Ramayana. I used to read, when I was traveling around, I used to read the Amachita. So, yeah. So that was very nice to learn a little bit about the stories and everything. But later I heard all these stories from Sadhu Om, and then I understood the deep significance of all these stories. Sadhu Om was a very, very good storyteller. So he told me stories from Ramayana, Mahabharata, so many Puranas, so many stories of great saints.
Very interesting.
So by Bhagavan's grace, though this body was born in a faraway country, I had, in my most formative years, from my late teens throughout my 20s, I mean, I was 29 when Sadhu Om left the body, so I was with him for nearly 8.5 years. So most of my 20s I was in his. That was my real formative years. But my real education was that, not all the school education I had before.
You are more Indian and more Hindu than Indians like us.
I don't know. It's all Bhagavan's grace, all Bhagavan's Leela.
You know more about Indian culture, Indian texts than we Indians.
Yes, and now he's kicked me far away.
But from there also, we can feel that you are teaching us in India what Indian texts are.
Yeah. Well, yes, because ultimately, what is important, I mean, it's a great blessing to live in Tiruvannamalai. I wouldn't know what I know, I wouldn't be what I am if it wasn't for the 20 years I lived in Tiruvannamalai. But ultimately, Smaranat Arunachalam, by mere remembrance of Arunachala, we attain mukti. So maybe sometimes Bhagavan sends us far away, but we think more about him.
I think, sir, your being there is a blessing, because in India it's very difficult to talk this freely as you talk.
Yes, particularly in Tiruvannamalai, it's very difficult. There's lots of politics there.
Yeah. No, in Indian also, because I've been to ashrams, so the purest teachings nobody appreciates. Like you will see your Zoom meetings are all from the UK, London, Spain, but they don't happen in India nowadays.
Yes.
Nobody is contacting you in India. So
well,
Indian,
individuals. Yes.
Very few. Not this thing. Not the center. Earlier it was there. Delhi was there. So what I'm trying to say is, sir, this place is slightly more conservative, not open to the deeper teachings. This is what I feel.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, over there in Western countries, they're open to it. I don't know why. What's the reason?
Well, yes, but it's not really to do with the countries. But yes, I think there's some truth in that. But there are many very good devotees of Bhagavan in India. There are many good devotees of Bhagavan all over the world.
Yeah, because over here things are all mixed. So many ideas are coming into us. So many other ideas are there, very powerful ideas. So this Bhagwan teachings gets overshadowed.
Yeah.
That could be one of the reasons. And like over there, they don't have so many varieties of ideas. They've got very fixed ideas are there. So when they are exposed to this Bhagwan teachings, it's something wonderful to them. But for us, it's like one of the teachings, not the only.
Yes. That is
We get
also
slightly confused. We get slightly confused.
But ultimately, it is all Bhagavan's grace. That is how we are drawn to Bhagavan, how Bhagavan spreads his teachings throughout the world and attracts those who are ready for it. It's all his grace. So whatever we say, ultimately, everything is His grace.
Definitely, definitely.
Our lives are shaped entirely by His grace.
Definitely. Definitely. It's been a pleasure being associated with you since about now 13, 14 years. I
Yes,
used to write so many emails, if you remember.
I remember, yes.
Like a mad person, I used to write.
Yes.
So nice to disturb you
Yes.
so much.
Well, we're all mad. But as Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, everyone is mad after the world. But if we're going to be mad, let's be mad for God, mad for Bhagavan.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I think we can conclude the session then.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sorry,
Michael.
it went a bit off on other subjects towards the end, but
No, it was very beautiful. It was a very good session. Thank you. And
Right.
thank you everyone for asking all the wonderful questions. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Namo Ramana.